Okay, now Double D, it is very important that you give Eddy these pancakes. Yum.
Very well, Ed. Here, Eddy.
Pancakes give me gas.
January 4th, 1999. Remember this date. It's an important date. Oh, you want to know why? Of course, my bad. January 4th, 1999 was the day Ed, Edd, and Eddy first premiered on Cartoon Network, quickly earning a spot on the network's Cartoon Fridays lineup. Created by Danny Antonucci, a Canadian animator who had much experience with hand-drawn animation, struck a deal with Cartoon Network to produce his show, Ed, Edd, and Eddy, as long as he maintained creative rights to the series. He wanted to tone his work down from the more edgier and more adult stuff like Lupo the Butcher and something more personal to him. A show that gave us a look into the basic everyday kid at the time, once you take away the cartoon slapstick fantastical comedy, and I think it's something kids can still relate to today. The lives and days of kids getting into random situations with other kids in the cul-de-sac. It didn't have flashy visuals or some crazy attention-grabbing gimmick, it really never needed any of that. It made sure to deliver first and foremost an interesting yet familiar concept that can bring you into this cul-de-sac, essentially like you were one of the residents living there and give you something special to be a part of. Ed, Edd, and Eddy was a breath of fresh air for Cartoon Network, something that treated its audience with a lot of respect and made sure to deliver entertainment within every episode. It created an environment open and welcoming to the viewer to connect with. But why did this show feel this way? Why could we connect with the cartoon characters so well?
Awesome, Kev!
Run! Run for your lives! Wipe out!
Not cool!
We follow three main characters: Ed, who was a slower kid, but his mind was filled beautifully and creatively. Double D was the smart kid who had germophobia and OCD, resulting in them not really fitting into any certain mold. And Eddy, the self-given title leader of the trio, who would usually be the mastermind scam artist in every situation. Any way to get a quick quarter. They would always clash with the rest of the kids in the cul-de-sac, who all portrayed varying tropes, like Kevin, the cooler, more athletic kid who really wasn't a bully, but would often threaten to beat up the Eds if they got out of line. Naz, who was the love interest that none of the Eds would ever get, plays this shy but also really popular girl. Sarah, Ed's baby sister, was always the big jerk trying to boss around Ed and the rest of the trio, serving as the regular antagonist of most of their plans. She usually hung out with Jimmy, a sensitive kid with some serious headgear for fixing his teeth. These two were the show's dynamic duo, most often not seen apart. Johnny was the loner kid who also wasn't the brightest and spoke to an inanimate piece of wood known as Plank. There's Plank, he's a piece of wood. But are there darker motives at play? Rolf, the kid from out of the country, and most notably for the show's most famous quotable lines, always brought an interesting perspective to any situation he was a part of. And of course, the Kanker sisters, the literal female versions of the Ed trio who lived in a trailer not far from the cul-de-sac, who were a little bit older but still had crushes on the Ed boys. But of course at this age, the Eds weren't looking for love, they just wanted some candy. Like most kids, trust me, I should know. The show gave any viewer the opportunity to find themselves within someone in the show. The kids felt like they were real kids you probably grew up with or were at least a little bit like, which made the show so easily relatable to over most of the shows on TV at the time. Every character had their good aspects and their not so good character traits. But that's what kids are. It's a time of learning about the world and figuring out right from wrong. Most of the kids were just looking for something to do, or they just wanted some jawbreakers. It really wasn't too much deeper than that.
If it wasn't for you, I'd be swimming in jawbreakers right now.
I have no idea what you're dorking about.
Oh, you know what I'm dorking about.
Put it behind you, Eddy. This was all just an unfortunate, unforeseen circumstance.
When it comes to the look of the show, they went with this very interesting look that not only sticks out as something special for the show, but added to the world of the show and kind of became its own character. This mimicked the tone that the show was going for. It's almost this dreamlike playground of imagination. The outlines of expressive thought, the pages ripped from your mind splattered onto the screen. You see, Ed, Edd, and Eddy was the last major production produced animated show to use traditional cell animation, opting to in the later half of the show's run to switch to paint and digital ink. But what was really important is how they created false movement, essentially a way to give the static images a feeling like there is always something happening, a flowing momentum. Danny Antonucci loved older animation and likened his use of boiling lines around the characters to the movement of characters used in the 1930s. These boiling lines would always simulate a consistent shimmering effect and brought more life into the show than just going with this choice alone, representing that just like life in each of the characters, it isn't perfect, it isn't supposed to look clean. It needs to represent the imperfections of life, how messy life can be, and in some ways the unpredictability of the unknown.
Shall we throw caution to the wind and enter this lair of...
Watch it! My brother was a whiz at booby traps.
How would you describe a traditional episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy? There's 3 Eds who try to figure out some scheme to trick the other neighborhood kids into giving them usually 25 cents so that they can go buy jawbreakers. Basically, they just wanted candy and they would do whatever they thought could work to bring in some. In most cases, you can break the show down as play pretend, something you and your friends used to do at a young age, or still do now, no judging. You'd have this weird aspect of how the kids would see their tiny world, how the smallest of things were way bigger or seen differently by them. I guess the biggest thing is that there isn't a real morality scale. Our main trio, and even by extension the rest of the kids in the cul-de-sac, there is no good guy or bad guy. It's not just one thing. Again, these were kids all dealing with their own issues, who just wanted candy for the most part. That's it. There is no ulterior motives pushing the Ed boys to take the other kids' money, both good or bad. The other kids get mad at the antics from the trio because they are basically the equivalent of that friend who does nothing but ask to borrow money, or spot them for lunch. No one in the show is inherently a bad person, and it's pretty important that it shows that. Every character has their moments depicting good and bad acts and the following results or consequences because of them. The way the creative mind a kid would have, the imagination was shown in the most realistic way too. How would you tell a story to convince another person something is real and then go and prove it just to be right? What would you and your friends build in lieu of entertainment? Or in most of the cases, once again, some quarters to go buy some candy. The show wasn't afraid to have big, grand ideas built by the structure of something so small, the simplest of ideas becoming an episode's main adventure. It was a charm that felt real, something we all for the most part experienced growing up, and something that at any age can bring you back to these moments in your life. This is why creativity, the spark to create something, is so important and amazing to see shown to a younger generation of future creators. To even now as an adult still finding something to take away.
Double D, my tummy feels all wiggly and crawly inside.
That's nice, Ed.
Ed, Edd and Eddy was not only super important to many people while it was on air, but it was one of Cartoon Network's biggest successes. It was their longest running original show, lasting for 11 years, finishing off with a TV movie titled Ed, Edd and Eddy's Big Picture Show, which culminated in everything the show was building up to. Characters actually developing further along as they understand the world better and their actions have consequences. It perfectly represented what growing up is, what it meant to see the world as a kid and starting to learn about morality. It was a unique way to portray all of this considering the show has it within the guise of ridiculous humor. And therein that lies the beauty, why this world works, why this show works. The ending of Ed, Edd and Eddy was a big deal for the network. It felt like the last big lesson to be learned, the hidden meaning behind everything. And that is, growing up can be hard. Things good and bad come and go. Not everyone or everything stays in your life, but it is what makes you, something that no one else can take away from you. The show was a perfect example of a good thing not overstaying its welcome, even though more of it was surely being demanded. Ed, Edd and Eddy was an iconic staple for Cartoon Network, a legacy left for those who grew up with it and for those who discover it later on. It feels timeless. The greatest aspect is that anyone and kid at any period in time can visit this cul-de-sac and instantly connect with it. This legacy worth more than all the jawbreakers the Ed boys could ever get their hands on.
Ed!
I unabashedly love Ed, Edd and Eddy. The show meant a lot to me as a kid, especially as a kid growing up in a cul-de-sac and having a trio group of friends who would use our imagination to create crazy scenarios and go on adventures. The show truly brings back these iconic memories for me to a simpler time, still defining who I would become today. The show was a form of self-realization and fantasy escapism that gave young minds a place to resonate their own self-image within and know that it's okay to not be perfect. You don't have to live up to unrealistic realistic standards. You are still finding out who you are and what makes you you. And that's what makes the show truly beautiful. Behind all of the craziness the show offered, behind all of the Canadian squirt guns, behind all of it, the show left its mark as something special that can be looked back upon decades later with great fondness. It didn't run like other cartoons overstaying their welcome. It gave you an ending, a proper ending, an ending that made sense for growing up, discovering yourself, and who you want to be. I want to know, what does Ed and Eddy mean to you? Did you grow up with the same feelings towards the show, or was it just another fun slapstick comedy that was something to just turn on? Let me know how you're feeling in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, hit the like button, press subscribe, and the little bell next to it to get notified when I upload next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.